Okay.
Awesome.
So,
Look at the screen.
when did you decide that you wanted to do skeleton?
Yeah, so that's a big question, being that the sport is so kind of strange and scary looking. But so as you know, but for purposes, I grew up in Manitoba too, right? I grew up in Brandon. So skeleton wasn't something that I even knew about when I was growing up. And I very much was more interested in volleyball from grade 7 on. That's what I played pretty exclusively. Like I did a ton of other sports, but once I found volleyball, that was all I wanted to do. So that was my love. And I thought that's what I was going to do for a long time. But it actually turned out that while I played volleyball in university, after switching schools, so I played a year in university in Ontario, and then some things changed in my life and I decided I wanted to be a little closer to home. So I switched schools to the University of Regina. So I went there thinking I was going to play volleyball again, but things didn't work out quite that way. So I played on the club team and I did the tryouts for the university team, just like I expected to, with the same coaching staff and team that I'd met the year before on my year off. And they actually changed their mind and they decided not to keep me. And that was really devastating. Like anyone who hasn't been picked for a team, whether it's in gym or something bigger, it feels awful. You think like, well, I love this. Why am I not being picked for this thing? I'm good at it. I don't understand. So I had a bit of a hard time with it, but I was still enrolled in university and I was going to be in the journalism school there. So I figured, well, I know how to do other sports. I'm going to try and go for the track and field team, which a lot of people would have said was crazy. I was 21 at the time, but hadn't done track since I was in grade 8. So very much behind the 8 ball in terms of being good at the things that everyone's good at when they run and jump for their whole lives. So the reason this is a long answer, because how I got into skeleton was through track and field. So the track and field community welcomed me in university, and I actually ran track and field for 5 years in school. So I used the other 4 years of eligibility and then 1 more year as well outdoor. And it was a great experience. And for 2 years, I was terrible at it. I was always behind. I thought I was good at these things, but it was a learning process and very humbling to be bad at a sport in a world where everyone was very good and you were supposed to be the best in the country because you're in a university doing it. So it was a big, big turning point for me. So after I graduated university, I had a job and was looking for some new opportunities in Calgary. So I moved to Calgary in 2009, and a track and field coach that I had met somewhere along the way in those 6 years of track reached out to me and said, well, what are you doing here? Why are you in Calgary? Like, what's happening? And I said, well, I don't know. I'm just looking for something to do. Like, do you guys have a track group that I can train with? And he said, yeah, for sure. I actually have some other athletes I'm training with as well, but they do skeleton. Now, I'd heard of bobsleigh and skeleton by this point, but I didn't think anything of it at the time. I was like, okay, because in the summer, skeleton athletes they sprint and they lift weights, just like a track and field athlete. So for me, that was just a normal transition. So I met them, and as it turned out, it was like a sneaky way of getting me into the sport. So I got to push in the ice house, which is an indoor facility where we just push the skeleton sled on a small scale. So the whole track's not there, but you just learn how to push the sled. So I got to try that just randomly. And again, like thinking of these age ranges, I was 25 at this point. So most people would say at 25, you're working full time, you're thinking about all these adult things, but I found a new sport. So then through that community, I got to try the sport of skeleton in Calgary that same year, so 2009. And ultimately, the Olympics were that year, 2010. So I got to go watch the Olympics live in Whistler. So I was just exposed to the sport. All these seemingly random things happened, but that's how I got to decide to get into it, because the world kind of presented it to me and I said yes.
That's actually really cool.
Yeah, I think so too. It was a weird way to get into it. I had to believe in myself for sure.
I already knew that you did volleyball because I've actually done some research on you.
Cool.
At school. So
yeah. Well, I played for the Neyland Spartans. That was my high school. So go Spartans.
And I also watched a video you made on skeleton too.
Nice. The one that's like get to know Cassie, that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool.
My second question is, when you were doing skeleton, how did it feel?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so after I'll share the video with you and you can take a look at this, but it's hard to describe. It is very much, people try and compare it to a roller coaster because of the feelings that you get when you're going up and down the different areas on the roller coaster. So you kind of get a little bit weightless and you get this weird feeling in your stomach. But more than anything, when you first start in skeleton, it just feels like chaos. You're laying on the sled, you don't really know where you're going, you're trying to remember everything. When you're first learning the sport, everything is coming at you so fast. You're trying to count corners because you're supposed to remember where you are. You're supposed to know when to drive the sled, meaning when to push your shoulders and your knees into the sled so that you can actually turn it, right? But if you're doing that at the wrong spot, and that could be like you did it, you missed it, and you're already in another corner. So all these things you're trying to teach yourself at the same time you're trying to relax. So the first 50 meters, you are running as fast as you can, holding onto something on the ground. So you only have one arm, whereas most sprinters have both. One of the neat things to understand about running is that whatever your arms do, your legs will do. So skeleton athletes have to train themselves to be able to get their legs to move really, really fast while one arm is stationary. So it's actually pretty difficult, and you're bent over on a really big angle. So you're using a lot of muscles in the back of your body. So think about that. So you're super, super tired. Literally, you're putting yourself out at 100%, sprinting as hard as you can. Then you have to gracefully jump onto a sled that's already moving downhill, and you're trying to not miss the sled, because if you miss the sled, then it's over. So you jump on the sled, and then you have to get your heart rate down to like resting. So you've just really jacked yourself up and got so excited. And now you're like, okay, now I need to focus. If you're too excited when you're doing skeleton, you can't control anything because you're just not in the moment. You're not able to know what's happening. You're not able to train your brain to slow things down, even going 120, 130, 140 kilometers per hour. So once you get good at the sport, it feels a lot more in sync. So you're very much in control of the sled. By the end of my career, honestly, I could memorize like any track really quickly, and really good skeleton athletes get to the bottom of the track and we have a notebook and we'll actually be able to write down every single corner and what happened in the corner. So I could say, I came in the corner like early, meaning that the right part of the corner, and then did this in the corner and I exited this way. And I can remember that the whole time. And I taught myself that over the course of the 10 years of my career. And that's really normal. But at the first, it is chaos. And by the end, it feels like flow.
That's pretty cool. I mean, I know you need to know like math and stuff like that really well just to do it and all that.
Yeah, I can answer a bit to that. Here, good follow-up. So there is a lot more to it. So the science of the sport comes into play as you get better. So understanding weather is a huge deal, right? It's not just about the ice, it's also about what the weather's doing. So humidity, it doesn't matter so much if it's snowing, it just matters how like wet it is outside. So if the humidity is really high, the ice surface will be different. So then that changes what we do with our sleds. We have to understand math, to your point, to understand the ways the corners are shaped and built. It doesn't mean we have to do like difficult equations, but the science behind understanding angles of corners is where it comes into play. So we'd literally lay on the track without our sleds. We'd walk the track inside to go learn it. And we would lay on the ice and like look up corners and try and figure out exactly like where the angle is, because when you're going super fast, you can't see that. So you have to remember and memorize every single kind of nuance, like just the simple things that might seem, because when you watch skeleton, it looks like they're not doing anything. Like you just jump on your sled and they have a nap. That's the joke. And you get to the bottom and you wake up and you ask yourself, did I win? But obviously so much more is going on during the actual race.
Yeah, because you have to make sure that you don't crash and stuff.
Yeah, that's the number one for sure.
My third question is, what are your thoughts when you are on the track?
You don't think about too much. So you might think because everything's happening so fast that you would be in a state of, like I said, chaos. But when you get good and you get in that flow, you're not thinking about anything else. And I think that's what really, really drew me to the sport, was because I speak fast. I do a lot of things in my life. So like the speed wasn't the issue. I found that it was the first sport that I ever did in my whole life where I could just be focused. I didn't have to worry about, like in volleyball, I didn't have to worry about what everyone else was doing. I didn't have to worry about what the ref was thinking or what just happened. I just had to worry about what I was doing in every single millisecond. So I get the sled at the starting block. I'm looking at the clock, waiting for it to turn green. Turns green. I have 30 seconds to push my sled. So that's what I think about, is just the push, like everything I can as fast as I can. Then you think about the load in the last 2 seconds. Then all you're thinking about is one corner at a time. So I'm not thinking about things that are ahead or scary. If there's a really hard corner or someplace that we maybe crashed in training, whatever, you're really, really thinking about what's next, and that keeps changing. And we train ourselves to do visualizations. So you can't have thousands and thousands of runs in sports like sliding sports. So even in skiing, like things that it's too much pressure and stress on your body and your mind to do hundreds of times, right? So you have to actually, in your mind, close your eyes if you need to. Some people have their eyes open, but I would literally sit at the top of the track and go down the track in my mind. And I would visualize every single possible steer that I needed in the right way. And I also remind people in the wrong way. So I would visualize things going wrong, because things do go wrong. A perfect run is very unlikely. So if things are going wrong, I want my brain to know how to handle that as well, so that I don't panic, because that's the difference. You can be afraid of something. And I'll tell you honestly, it was scary sometimes standing at the top of these mountains being like, oh, okay, I gotta be one of the best in the world. There's cameras. I don't want to crash. This sport is kind of scary still. But being afraid can be very powerful because you can still use it as fuel. Panicking is when things go wrong. So you can be afraid and still succeed, but you can't panic and control yourself. So that's the difference.
Yeah. And what's something you would tell a young woman if they wanted to try skeleton?
I would say you have to try it to know. That's the simple thing. So when people think it's too scary or I would never do that, I'm sure I thought all those things too, but you need to get out of your own way and just take a shot at whatever the sport is. It might seem weird, or your friends are telling you like that's not for you or whatever. Other people have lots of opinions. If it's something that you're interested in, even a tiny little bit, and you have an opportunity, whatever the thing is in sports, just give it a shot. We're all going to be bad at it the first time you do it, probably the first 100 times you do it. But that's how you get better, is by sticking with it, listening to people that understand how to do it. Like, listen to yourself. Skeleton definitely taught me how to understand my body in a different way and use it in a sport that had an equipment piece, right? Because very much the other sports I didn't have much equipment, whereas skeleton is a very equipment-based situation. And I had to learn the sled, but the sled was only as good as me. So no matter what I did, if I couldn't drive that sled, if I couldn't be in tune with it, it wasn't going to win any races.
Yeah. That's actually a pretty good answer to that.
Thank you, Casper. Cool. Is there any other questions that you have? I know that those 4 you had, but is there anything you want to follow up with what I've said?
Has there ever been a time when you were doing skeleton that you thought that you were going to crash?
Yeah, lots of times. Crashing in skeleton is pretty very, I would say, very constant. It doesn't happen in the same way as dramatic as people think, though. So fun fact, no one has ever died doing skeleton. So there's that. So people that think, oh, it's so dangerous, you're going to die. Probably not. The bottom of the sled, just so that there's some understanding, people think that the runners, the steel underneath the skeleton sled, are like skates, but they're not. They're very round, very round. So that roundness makes it so that the sled is actually skidding almost all the time. So there's a very small section, about 2 feet, the length of your quad, so the front part of your leg, that's where it's cut out on the actual skeleton sled runner. And those cuts change depending on how much control they want in the sled. So that's the only place that actually digs into the ice to help you steer. So when you are in a situation where you're trying to pick equipment so that you don't crash, it happens anyways. Ultimately, what's happening is you've lost contact with the ice. So you're very much just, those round runners are just like on the surface of the ice, like skidding sideways. But because they don't move and they're in like train tracks, the sled just kind of fishtails around. So in the moments where you know you're about to crash, okay, well, like it doesn't happen ahead of time, you just know it's about to happen. So you're in a corner, something went wrong, you know you're kind of faced a little bit too high or too low, and you're like, oh no, here we go. And it actually gets that roller coaster weightless feeling happens because the gravity is holding you on the corner. So it's pushing you, all those G forces are pushing you, pushing you, pushing you. And usually you know when it should end so that you can come out of the corner. And suddenly it ends very quickly. And you know that you're like, uh-oh. And then you just lose contact with the ice and boom, you're on your back and the sled goes someplace else. So, you know, you don't really have the inkling at the moment until it's the time it's happening. And all you can do in that moment is know that it's up to you to be in control. So I've had moments where I've crashed, lost my sled, and in the exact same moment, no one can teach you this, I've reached out ahead of me, grabbed the sled and pulled the sled back underneath me and finished the run. So not everyone always loses, and you can't be like, can we practice crashing today? Can someone like throw me off my sled? It just has to happen for you to go, okay, I'm going to be okay when that happens. But it's a wild feeling, Casey. It's like Casper, it's not something that that anyone can prepare you for.
Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this with me.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Look at me.
She's like, Dad, what do we do? If you can keep it recording, Joel, I don't know if you can, I can try and share a point of view video and then you guys can record that during this, if that's something you want to do.
Sure. Do I have to turn it over to you again?
Yeah, if you can change it on the participants over to host, it should keep recording and then I can share my screen.
I think I did it.
Oh, actually, okay, yeah, we're good. Here, you can, looks like it's enabled anyways. Can you see my screen, the little tiny Calgary, Canada?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and it's still recording. Yeah, perfect. All right. Actually, wait a second. I forgot to share the audio. Yep. Okay, so the reason I want to show you this is to answer your one question about how it feels. So as I said, it's really difficult to understand how it feels and you can't get those sensations without really being there. So this is a point of view video from me in Calgary in 2012. So the sled camera, the camera's on the corner of my sled, just right on my shoulder. And when I jump on the sled, you'll see the helmet come to the left side of the screen. So I'm not going to talk too much. I just want you to watch and then just listen. So the sounds, the air moving, the ice, everything. So that's all you have for feedback as a skeleton athlete. They're those simple senses. So here we go.
You can't see any video right now?
Oh, you can't?
Nope.
Okay.
Might be an issue with full screen video. I'm not sure.
Yeah, fair enough. Hold on. I got to fix for that. One moment. Okay, it might just be because of where I was playing it. And okay. All right, let's try this again. All right, you should see a black square.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. You see that? finish line. So remember, no brakes. So the athlete has to sit up on the sled a little bit on their elbows and push their toes into the ground. So the shoes are designed for that, so that you can push into the ice.
The
And
shoes have
then
a lot of spikes.
yeah, the spikes on the bottom. At the front, they have these like toe caps that are made out of pretty hard plastic so that you can use them. Yeah, I just wanted to show you that because that's like a really interesting way to try and explain to someone what it's like to do it when you know what you're doing. So you can see that speed, you can see the head being like pulled into the ice, and every tiny little movement on a sled like that is a steer. So thank you. Thanks for all your questions, and I hope this helps.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Bye, Joel.
Okay,
Have a great
bye-bye.
day too. Bye.